everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Tonight we are going to make some fried tilapia with sourdough, Cajun sweet potato fries, and some coleslaw. So let's start by prepping up our sourdough. This is just our basic traditional loaf. We'll flip it out and then we will score it and pop it in the oven for it to bake up. Okay, so we've got our nice little loaf here. And then I'm just going to do a good expansion score. And I always like to kind of really cut it in there. And then we'll do our wheat leaf, but instead of when I do my loaf shape, where I do it, across long ways, I'm going to do it down the edge of our loaf here. And we'll just keep it like that. Simplicity. Okay, I'm going to put it in my Dutch oven that I had preheated to 500 degrees. It's very, very hot. Let's slide this guy in here. Perfect. We're going to put our lid on, and we're going to pop this guy in the oven at 500 degrees for 20 minutes. Then we will reduce the temperature down to 450, take off the lid, and cook it for the final 20 minutes. And hopefully by then, all of dinner is ready. Okay, so we've got it in here. I'm going to set my timer for 20 minutes. And let's start prepping up our sweet potato fries so that when we take the lid off and turn it down to 450, we can pop our sweet potato fries in to start baking up and all that jazz. Okay, so I've got 2 good-sized sweet potatoes here. We're going to cut off the top and the bottom, and then I'm just going to use my knife to give it a good peel. And you just slide it down. You just have to level out your bottom so that you have a nice flat area to work with. And I find this is much easier than using a peeler for a sweet potato. Here we go. And you've got to take the skin off. Sweet potato skins are very dry and like woody in texture and flavor, so they're not very good to eat. Okay, so 1 sweet potato down. And I do sweet potatoes in a lot of different ways. This is a favorite, our Cajun sweet potato fries. I'm a big fan of having savory sweet potatoes over sweet, sweet potatoes done sweetly. Yeah, I'm just not a big fan of this Southern sweet potato casserole because to me that's more of a dessert than a side dish because it's so sweet. Okay, let's get this peeled off. But I was sitting there and I'm like, you know what? I feel like Cajun sweet potato fries would be delicious with fried fish. So that's what we're doing.
Yeah, and how was the brunch?
It was excellent. My mom joined us and everything got eaten up. There was no leftovers, all the waffles. And waffles turned out exceptionally good today. I think I got them cooked just perfectly. So they were that crisp and light and fluffy. So they were delicious. And everybody loves skillet potatoes. Even Teddy, he ate 2 fried eggs. I had to cook up another one because we ate all the eggs and then he needed another fried egg. He's finally gotten over for the longest time he wouldn't eat fried eggs. He was so mad anytime I made fried eggs. He wanted me to scramble them. But he's finally gotten over that. For our sweet potatoes, I'm going to kind of cut them in half, and we're actually going to do, they're going to be fries, but we're going to do kind of like a sweet potato disc. That just makes them cook up really nicely and a little bit easier to eat. You don't want to cut your sweet potatoes too thick or you're not going to get a good crispiness on them, but again, you don't want them so thin that they're like a potato chip. So I give a nice kind of a thin little disc on this so that they'll cook up in time. There we go. And then we're going to coat them with olive oil, onion powder, a little bit of flour, some Lowry seasoning salt, and then some Tony Chachere's Creole seasoning. There we go. Get these chopped up. You know, I always surprised how much one sweet potato, this is just one sweet potato right here, and how much it's going to make. Here we go. And again, you don't need to cut them, you know, paper thin like potato chips, but just a nice kind of thickness to them. These ones, I might actually just leave as a disc because there's a very oblong and thin sweet potato here. There we go. And I'm going to use, in my fish, I'm going to use my Lowry's seasoning salt as the main seasoning for it. And I think those will play really well and kind of bring them together. I'm still deciding whether I want to do a little bit of Creole spice in the fish, make it more of a little, you know, a Cajun fried fish. You know, we'll see. When I get to mixing them, we'll see how I feel and whether I'll do that in there. I might have it all together. I was thinking I almost was going to do fried fish sandwiches and make homemade pretzel buns, but I kind of ran out of time. And so I was like, oh, I've got my sourdough. We'll bake that up instead. Because I always like to have one sitting in my fridge, you know. Because the nice thing is once you've got it, you can have it sit in your fridge for a couple days before you bake it up. Okay, we've got our sweet potatoes here prepped, the base part, and it's quite a bit.
You have a question? How are you cooking the fish tonight?
We're going to do a fried fish. So we're going to do a panko battering on them. And I think I might do like some Creole spices in it. And that way they kind of all play together with the Cajun sweet potato fries. Okay, we've got our sweet potatoes here. We're going to give them a nice drizzle of olive oil. We're going to probably want about a tablespoon or so in here, maybe a little bit more. We want enough that we're going to be able to coat all of our sweet potatoes with it, but it doesn't need to be dripping in it. We've got that. Let me grab, here's my flour. I'm going to put about a tablespoon and a half of flour in here. So a good kind of shake over. This is going to help it get a really nice kind of crispy crust on it. And we're going to put some paprika in here. This is going to give it a nice, lovely color and a nice savory flavor. About, I want to say, you know, a teaspoon. And then we're going to use some Lowry seasoned salt. We're going to shake over about, I want to say like a teaspoon. We're going to add in onion powder. We're going to want about a teaspoon and a half of onion powder. Again, this is going to give it a nice savory flavor. And then we're going to add in some Creole seasoning, Tony Chachere's. I actually love this. It's got a bit of a kick. So we're just going to do about a teaspoon of it, but it has some red pepper in it. We'll give it a little bit of a spice to it. But I think that's going to play really well with our sweet potatoes. And now we're going to go in here and we are going to coat these potatoes up with all of our spices and that oil in there until I've got this nice paste that kind of covers them up. And you want to just make sure that you've got them equally mixed here. And then we're going to lay them out on our baking sheet so that they'll crisp up nicely. There we go. And again, I don't want to see any of the flour or whatnot. I want to make sure every sweet potato is a little bit dressed in the oil. I'm going to actually add a smidge more. Sweet potatoes are a bit more like sponges than, there we go, about a half teaspoon more than regular potatoes. So they just need a smidge more. And that was a really big sweet potato. So here we've got them nicely covered and coated in our spices and our mix. So I'm going to give my hands a quick wash because I set out my smaller baking sheet, my regular size baking sheet, but I think I'm going to use my big baking sheet, which I love because it is it's like a sheet and a half. So this will allow me to spread out and I should be able to get all of these sweet potatoes on here without having to lap them up, you know, on top of each other. So we're going to spread these out And we're going to make sure that each one has its own space on there. That way they get crisped up. And I like to do it directly on the baking sheet versus putting it on parchment paper, because I find that it crisps up just a little bit nicer when it's getting that direct heat. There we go. So we'll spread these guys out. And I definitely think I'm glad I moved to my big sheet here. Slide them apart. You want to make sure you don't get any that are stuck together, because those won't crisp up nice. Then you'll just have kind of mushy sweet potato fries. And we want a nice crispness to these. So we'll spread them out. There those. That's just a chunky one. And it's okay if they're like touching edge to edge. You just want to make sure that they're not resting on top of each other. And these are going to be delicious. So it's hard to believe, but yes, 2 sweet potatoes, it's going to make a whole bunch of sweet potato fries. Okay, this looks pretty good. Now I'm just going to sit this over there, and remember, we will pop this in the oven right after we switch take our lids off and bring the temperature down. Okay, now that I have that, I'm going to wash my hands. And let's get our fish prepped up and ready to start frying as soon as we're done. So I'm just going to slide this right over here. I've got my tilapia fillets over here. Earlier in the week I bought a huge pack of tilapia, and we had blackened tilapia. So I love fried fish. So we're going to do a nice fried fish on here. Let's get our seasoned dredge for this. And then we will start kind of coating them up. We're going to start with paprika. This is going to give it a really lovely color. It's pretty full, so I'm going to I want about a tablespoon of paprika in here. This is going to give it a nice kind of darker golden fry on it, but these flavors of paprika will really play in well with the Cajun ones. And we're going to use some Tony Chachere's Creole seasoning, and I'm going to put in I'm going to do about 1.5 teaspoons. I don't want to do too much because this does have a little bit of a heat to it, and I'm kind of a spice baby. We're going to add onion powder. I'm going to go for about 1 tablespoon of onion powder. Gives a nice savory flavor to it as well. And then I've got some Mrs. Dash's original blend. This will just give us a nice, some more herbs and flavor. We're going to put about 1.5 teaspoons of that in here. And then I have some Lowry seasoned salt. And we're going to add in about, I want to say 1.5 teaspoons as well. And then just a pinch of black pepper in here. If you like it extra spicy, you could switch this to some cayenne pepper or red pepper, and then you can get a little bit more heat. Let me grab a fork, and we're going to mix that up. And then this is our seasoned dredge that we're going to coat all of our fish in. And then once we have our first coating on it, then we'll mix in some panko breadcrumbs. But you always want to do the first coating without the panko breadcrumbs, because those won't stick onto your fish and it'll just be a waste. Here we go. So I'm just making sure I mix it up nicely, because I want all of these spices to be all mixed into our dredge. Beautiful. Okay. We've got this kind of first base, and then I'm going to mix up my eggs, because we are going to be, this will be for the egg battered part of it. And I'm going to do 4 eggs because I have a good amount of tilapia. Now they're smaller tilapia, but I'm still going to use a lot of egg for it. And you'd rather err on the side of having too much egg than not enough, because you don't want to have to go grab another egg and crack it in the middle of the process. And then we're just going to whisk this up until we have all of that yolk mixed into our white, and then no big stringy parts of our egg white, because that will pull up when you dredge it and it just won't make a You don't want it on your fish because then it will just be like a gooey, slimy part that won't crisp up well. So we'll mix this in. There we go. And then just pull up any of those kind of chunks that aren't mixed in. Okay. That was good. I'll bring my frying pan back over here now. And let's get, I'm not going to turn my oil on just quite yet, but I'll pour it in here so that it will be ready when I need to. I'm going to just put a nice layer on the bottom of my pan. I don't need to have a whole lot of oil. It doesn't need to be completely drenched in it, just enough to kind of fry up that bottom half, and then we'll flip it over. That way you're not wasting a lot of oil. And then let me get my panko breadcrumbs ready to pour in when we are ready for it. But let's go through now, and we are going to take our tilapia and we are going to bread or dredge it in our seasoned flour right now so that we can then bread it up. And again, this is like a really crucial part because it's going to allow you to get the binder to get the second layer of breading to hold. It's going to mix with the egg and make it just delicious and kind of keep all that crunch on there. Now, if you don't like a heavily breaded fish or one that has a thicker crust, you could also just stick with the base layer, which would give you this really, really thin breaded crust on it. So if you wanted to go with a lighter fare, that is definitely an option. Just to give you halfway through your fried area. There we go. And then it's also really important. I know a lot of people will dredge in flour first and then season it up. I always do flavor it up because this is the first part of the seasonings that stick onto the fish. So this is where you're going to get the most flavor out of it. And I find that use more spices than you think because the spices are only going to coat a thin layer of this fish, and you want it to be enough to season it all the way through. And if you're going to do the hard work of breading and frying your own fish or chicken or whatever you want to bread, you want to make sure that it's not bland.
You have a question? Will the full video be uploaded?
Yes, we will upload the full video to the link on our page. It always takes us a little bit while after the stream, but we try to have it up within an hour or two. So you can definitely rewatch and cook these at home. Here we go. I'll pat this guy down on here. Okay. And now we put in our panko breadcrumbs. We're going to add in about a cup of panko. You can also use traditional breadcrumbs if you want. The difference is panko is going to give you a bigger crunch. Traditional breadcrumbs are finer. Therefore, you'll still get a good crunch, but it won't be that big crunchiness to it. So mix this all in. I'm going to add just a teeny bit more here. And then now we've got our kind of our breadcrumb mixture, which I like to do, mix it back into the dredge. And we're going to go into our egg mixture. And you see how it literally coats on to the fish and it kind of is creating the glue that's going to hold on this next base. And then I just pat it down. And I always like to give it a good pat because I feel like it holds a little bit better. And once we get these all dredged up, they will be ready for frying. And we'll start that right after we get our sourdough, the lid off in our oven for cooking up. And then we'll make our homemade tartar sauce, which is the bomb. Once you know how to make homemade tartar sauce, it's just so much better than anything you can buy at the store. And it's going to elevate your meal, I feel like, to as if you've had it at a restaurant. And it's so simple to make. It's really easy and it doesn't use very many ingredients. There we go. That's always I love tartar sauce. I'm always like, if I go to a restaurant and if I order fried fish or whatnot, I'm always like, bring me extra tartar sauce because there needs to be a good bit on every bite of fish. And I like to dip my fries in it. I know, crazy, but it's delicious. Okay. Same goes with ranch. I'm crazy about ranch too. I'm a dip person. I really like my dips. Okay. Let's get these guys going. Now I'm using tilapia because tilapia is a pretty good, it's a really light fish. It holds its shape well. It gets nice and flaky, but it's not so flaky on there. And I feel like it works really well with this breading. Grouper works well with this red snapper, orange roughy. They all kind of work well with this. If for cod, I typically do a different type of, I do a batter instead of a breading on cod because cod is a much thicker and more flaky fish. And I feel like you want a more substantial kind of a different type of battering on there. So I definitely use a batter instead of a breading for cod. But for tilapia, I find that this gives the nice kind of, it just works really well with this cut of fish. Here we go. And catfish. I do catfish with this breading as well. I feel like those two work really well. Here we go. And we're down to just our last few. This is the reason also why I keep one hand clean and one dirty there because now I've got a free hand to do stuff with. Here we go. Let's get this guy all patted up. And you see how I have plenty of extra dredge and whatnot. Always err on the side of having too much because you really, really don't want to have to go in there and get all your spices back out and re-season everything.
Yeah, question. What was in the first layer of flour?
So the first layer of flour, we used about a tablespoon of paprika, a tablespoon of onion powder, about a half tablespoon of Lowry seasoning salt, a half tablespoon of Tony Chachere's, and then we used about a teaspoon and a half of Mrs. Dash's original blend to make ours, and then again a little bit of pepper. Okay, we've got these dredged up. I'm going to go wash my hands, and then we can go and take the lid off of our sourdough bread, turn the temperature down to 400, and get our sweet potatoes in. So let's get a good wash over here. I always got to de-bread my hands first. Okay. And then we're going to make sure I fully dry them because I don't want them to go through. Turn that guy off. We're going to put our sweet potatoes in right underneath. And we'll let these start to cook up at this temperature. And now we'll take out our loaf here. We're going to take off our lid and then we'll turn our temperature down to 450. Beautiful. Look at that gorgeous pop. This is going to be lovely. Okay, so I've got my bread in there. I'm going to bring my oven temperature. It was at 500, so the first bake was 500 for 20 minutes. Now we're going to bring it down to 450 for 20 minutes. And that's going to give you the perfect kind of golden brown crust. I don't like a really dark brown crust on my sourdough because I find that it gets too crunchy. And Teddy will say when it's too crunchy, he goes, "It hurts my mouth. It hurts my mouth." So I like it where it's still chewy, but not overly crunchy. We're going to turn on our burner right here. Let the oil start heating up. I'm going to move my breaded fish right over here. That way we can add it in there. I'm going to clean up this area so I have a good space to work with my other cutting board, and to make our coleslaw and all that jazz. Here we go. Let me go get a wet paper towel to clean this off.
You use olive oil?
I do use olive oil. Now, I will start heating it up on high in the beginning, and then I'll turn it down to a medium because I like to fry my food around 350. That gives it the perfect golden brown and then allows you to cook it long enough so it's cooked all the way through. So I really enjoy olive oil. I like the taste of it, but I feel like oil is really a personal preference. So you can definitely do whatever oil you want for it. I know a lot of people will do peanut oil or vegetable oil or whatnot, but I prefer olive oil. I like the flavor it has. Okay, let's start on our coleslaw here.
You have another request for a cookbook?
I know. I'm working on it, guys. I'm working on it. You know, I do send out recipe cards for my members every week. Tomorrow we're going to do our recipe card post. Well, we'll send out 3 recipe cards for them with a little like short on it. I try to pick some recipes from the past week that we did for it. So that'll be looking for that for tomorrow for our members. But in the meantime, all you guys, we also have our videos that you can definitely always watch and cook along with me again. Okay, we're going to start with our coleslaw here. So I've got some green cabbage. I'm probably going to make some cabbage rolls soon because this was such a great green cabbage that I peeled off all these really big cabbage leaves because they were like the perfect cabbage roll leaves. So I'm leaving just this kind of lighter green part for my coleslaw. So I'm going to chop this up. I just feel like coleslaw goes so well with fried fish. I like it on if I was, my original plan is, oh, I'll make homemade pretzel buns and we'll do fish sandwiches. And then I was like, oh, we'll do coleslaw on it. But coleslaw is just delicious. I think it just works well because that mayo base gives that creaminess and you got the crunchy, pulls it all together. Okay, we're going to kind of chop this up for it. And I always say, I'm like, you can always buy the shredded cabbage, but there's no need. I feel like it's so easy to cut up. And normally, I had used most of that cabbage is going to be for some cabbage rolls later, but a little bit of cabbage goes a long way. So you can actually, it will last forever because it's such a hearty vegetable. So I'll have a head of cabbage last me like two or so weeks. Okay, let's get all of slice this guy up. He's a little bit small. So we're going to get our cabbage first in here for our coleslaw. And then I'll test my oil here in just a second. I won't throw my fish in until I've tested it with a drop of water. And if it sizzles with a drop of water, I'll turn it down to a medium and then we'll drop our first sets of fish in. Okay, let's give it a try. I feel like there's some radiant heat coming off. Just a small drop of water. If it doesn't sizzle right away, still I'm going to give it like 30 more seconds to heat up. Then just wait. Do not put too much water in or you're going to start getting a lot of bubbling for it and popping. So while we're waiting for that to heat up just a little bit longer, I'm going to give this carrot a peel because we're going to make some carrot ribbons go in our coleslaw. I'm going to first take off this whole outer layer because it's not going to be very good. It's dried out and not as fresh and nice. Okay, this is looking hot. So I'm going to turn again. I warmed it up on high, but now I'm going to bring it down to about a 5 and we'll drop our fish in. You don't want to leave it up high because if you do, you're going to end up burning your fish and burning your breading. And that would just be so sad since you did so much hard work for it. So we're going to pop these guys in here. And since these are pretty big, these first ones, I'm just going to do 3 at a time. And we'll let those fry up and then we'll flip them over and we'll do the next some. Fish cooks a lot faster than a lot of different cuts of meat. It's since it's a lighter, not as dense meat, it cooks up much faster, which means we can get through this pretty quickly. So let's make our carrot ribbons that we're just going to give a slight chop to for our coleslaw. And then we can finish up making that. We'll dress it in air mayo dressing that we're going to make. And then we'll make our tartar sauce, which is similar on the lines to coleslaw. It's kind of got a similar base, just not as sweet. So let's just take this. You could always use a grater and grate your carrots, but I really love carrot ribbons. I feel like they're not as tough in texture, and I don't like the pre-shredded carrots that you can get at the store. I think those are way too thick. And so I really love just using my vegetable peeler to do carrot ribbons because they're a little bit more substantial, like thicker in size, so you get a little bit more carrot flavor, but they're thin, so they're delicate. There we go. So I'll get these last little bits down. And then I'm just going to make a pile so that they're not super long in our slaw. And we'll just do a couple of chops over it. You don't really need to do that much. We'll throw these guys in. And then I have some red onion that we're going to slice up and throw in our coleslaw as well. Now you could also add in, some small pieces of peppers if you wanted to, but I'm just going to keep mine carrots, red onions, and cabbage. Sometimes simplicity is better than trying to overcomplicate it. Okay, I'm going to take off this whole kind of top layer because we're going to be using some of this in both. And I will say, red onion is what you have to use. You cannot substitute it with a yellow onion or Valdalia. They're just too astringent in flavor. So you really want to stick with the red onion. Okay, we don't need a whole lot because it will pack a little bit of a punch. So I've got my kind of thin slivers here, and then I'm just going to do kind of a smaller chop on them. That way you'll get little bits of the red onion in there, but it won't be overpowering. Just toss these in to our coleslaw as well. Let's check. I'm going to rotate my pan right here.
I have a question. Have you ever had it with pineapple?
You know what? I have never had coleslaw with pineapple, and I think that would be definitely like a different flavor. I personally like my coleslaw not super sweet, so I don't put as much sugar in it that most people on it. But I could see like a nice sweetened coleslaw would be great with the pineapple. Let's get these two, one for a coleslaw. Ooh, this red onion is starting to make me tear up a little. Okay. So let me grab a spoon. And I realized I forgot to grab my vinegar. So let me grab my vinegar in here. I think, if I remember correctly, we're going to have to use a little bit of balsamic vinegar for this. And because normally I would use apple cider. And then we'll check on our fish in just a second. I typically wait until I can see a nice golden edge forming up around the side. And that's when I'll know to flip it. I'm going to start with, I've got about a cup of mayo in here because we've got a pretty good size thing. So let's check. Again, let's check this, see how it looks. Just about. Beautiful. And now we're going to have a nice kind of a golden red color to it because remember we put in about a tablespoon of paprika in our breading, which is going to give us a richer color to our fry, which I love. If you like a blonder fry, then just omit the paprika, but that paprika will give you that savory flavor and that nice darker color to your fry. Okay, we've got our mayo. There we go. We got our mayo. Use fresh mayo like that one that you bought recently. Mayonnaise, I find, goes bad. Even though we'll say Best Buy, it picks up all of the flavors in your fridge and gets a funky taste after about a couple of months. So always use fresh one. Whenever I go to my parents' house, I always throw theirs out and I get new ones. We're going to use, I'm going to use about 2 capfuls, which is about 2 teaspoons of vinaigrette. Normally I would use apple cider, but I used up all of my apple cider vinegar the other day. So we're going to use balsamic, which is going to be about the same flavor profile, but instead of having a blonder color to it, it will have a more brown color, but the vinegar tastes very, very similar. Oh, I realized I could have used my rice vinegar. That would have been good, but this works just as well. So we've got our vinegar in here, and then we're going to add in some sugar. And again, I don't put a lot of sugar in my coleslaw. So I'm going to stick with about 2 tablespoons of sugar in here.
Yeah, so, what does the family eat the most of?
They will eat the most of, or just in general, their favorite foods, pasta, and they love fried chicken or steak. Steak is definitely their favorite, although we don't have, my oldest daughter wishes we could have steak every single day, but I'm like, I'm like, who has the budget for steak every day? And it's not just any steak. She wants filet mignon. And I'm like, well, when you grow up, you can buy yourself filet mignon every day. I hope you get a great job. Okay, let me give this a little taste. Perfect. I got the sweetness right. I got the tanginess. We're going to add a little bit of pepper, about a half a teaspoon. A little bit of garlic salt, about a half a teaspoon. You don't need a lot because mayo has already a good, amount of salt in it. And then we're just going to do a squeeze of some fresh lemon juice. And that's about a teaspoon. And that's just going to give you another kick of acidity. And then we're going to throw our dressing in here. And we're going to give it a good toss and coat up our coleslaw with this. And it's going to be delicious. And then we'll check on our fish here and drop our next ones in. But I want to make sure I get my coleslaw all coated. And that way it can sit. Now with coleslaw, I like to let it sit at least 5 to 10 minutes before you serve it because it kind of needs to marinate a little bit in that dressing. Well, let me grab my good old paper towels.
Do you always use garlic salt in place of regular salt?
In savory dishes, yes. I love garlic salt. I think it just adds a whole nother flavor complexity to it. And, there's this theory that mosquitoes don't like garlic, so I don't think it works because I still get bit up by mosquitoes all the time. Oh. And so I do because I love it. Now, baking, of course, I do not do it.
And it protects you from vampires.
Oh, yes, the vampires. And we are getting into that season where the vampires like to come out. So, of course, very, very important. Okay, we're going to let this guy. Yeah, he's good. Okay, we've got our first set of fried fish coming up. This is our fried tilapia. And we gave it a kind of a Cajun seasoning with our Tony Chateau's Creole seasoning and some Lowry seasoning salt. And we're going to get our next set in. We'll get those frying up. And again, you don't need a whole lot of oil, just enough to cover the half part so that it will, crisp up nicely. Oh, forgot I wanted to toss in some green onions into my coleslaw here. We're going to use some in our tartar sauce. But let's get these couple snips because, again, I like a more salty, savory coleslaw. I don't like it to be heavily sweetened. But I feel like that comes down to personal preference and what people are used to. But I do like a slightly saltier one.
Good question. What brand pan are you using?
So my pans that I use for my nonstick cooking, these are the Hexclad. So this is the 12-inch frying pan from Hexclad. Absolutely love it. I've had it for about 2 years now, and I have yet to scratch it. So that is a win. And then I have some of my other pans. I use between Hexclad and All-Clad. I love the All-Clad. They're metal ones. I've had those for about 16 years now, and they're going strong. So they're great for it. And then I have one other pan that I use that I love, which is a stand pan. And it is the one I have is a metal pan that has a cast iron coating on it. So you get all the goodness of cast iron frying without having to do all the work of seasoning that cast iron. Okay, let's start making our coleslaw here. Or not our coleslaw, our tartar sauce. So I'm going to start with 2 pickles, or if you have a one big pickle or a regular size one, we're going to mince it up. This is going to add part of our textured base to our tartar sauce, and it is very critical to have the pickles. That adds the right flavor profile and everything. Use kosher. Don't use a sweet pickle because they're just, like you said, I like things salty and not sweet. So a nice kosher dill pickle is what you want for this. That saltiness and the little acidity from the pickle juice is going to be perfect. We're going to mince it up. Now you can leave it extra chunky if you like bigger chunks in your tartar sauce, but I like to have it a nice kind of smaller bits for it. So this is going to be about 1/4 of a cup of diced up pickles. And then we're going to have about the exact same in our red onion. So I'm going to take some slices here and then we're going to dice up And aim about 1/4 of a cup as well. This, and you want to use red onion. You can't really substitute this with a yellow onion or a white onion. They're too strong of flavor, and they'll just make your tartar sauce have more of an astringent flavor to it.
You have a question about what temperature do you cook the fish at?
I am cooking them right now at about a 4.5, but you have to start your oil on high. So I heat my oil up on high until it sizzles with a drop of water. And then I turn it down to my like medium temperature, right around a 4.5. And that's going to give it the perfect kind of golden fry that doesn't cook too fast. If your oil is too high, it's going to cook the outside too fast, and then you'll burn it before you've got it cooked all the way through. And if you put it too low, it'll take forever, but then you're going to get more of a soggy fry. Okay, so we've got about a 1/4 cup of our minced up red onions here. And now I'm going to add in some green onions. And that's because I just love green onions. We don't need much, just about a tablespoon.
And how do you know when the fish is done?
When I look at it and I can see my edges starting to get golden brown, I'll know it's ready to flip over. It typically takes 2 to 3 minutes per each side. And then you'll take it off once you look. I always take a peek at it, make sure I see that it's nice and crispy when I flip it over. Beautiful. And then I'm going to rotate and have this guy, because my pan is always hotter over here. But again, I'll know there, pick it up and look. But it's typically with fish, it's about 2 to 3 minutes. Fish doesn't take as long to fry. With chicken, I always make sure I fillet my chicken to a thinner cut so that it's not super thick. And that's about 3, sometimes 4 minutes on each side for it. Okay, we got our green onions in there. We're going to use dill. You can use dried dill or fresh dill. I happen to have fresh dill today, so we're going to use our fresh dill. And you're going to want about a teaspoon of fresh dill or a 1/2 teaspoon of dried dill. So we're going to take off any of these little stalks here. And then I'm going to mince this guy up nice and fine. That way, instead of having long, stringy strips of it, we'll have just kind of perfect amount. It's nice and fresh. But here, again, we've got about a teaspoon of our fresh dill. We'll put it in there. Now we're going to add in about I'm going to see. I'll tell you what it is once I scoop it in visually. It's going to be about, 2/3 of a cup of mayo. And then, this is crucial, you need fresh lemon juice. You're going to want about a 1/2 of a lemon of fresh lemon juice, around, 1.5 to 2 teaspoons of fresh lemon juice.
You have a question. How do you learn to cook such a large variety of food?
Just practice over the years. I've been cooking since I was 13 years old. I started cooking family dinners there for my family growing up, and I absolutely love it. And so anytime I've wanted to try something, I learn how to cook it. I do multiple times, and then I remember it. Okay, we're going to go we'll pull these out. They're almost done. But let's go grab our sourdough bread out of the oven. And our sweet potatoes should be done. And then we'll finish up with our tartar sauce. Beautiful. Looks like everything is done. So we've got our beautiful sourdough bread here. Look how gorgeous that looks. We're going to come place it over here. And then I'm going to grab my sweet potato fries while we're at it. Grab some trivets. Perfect. And our sweet potato fries, I'm going to slide in over here so they're going to be hot. I don't want to burn you. There we go. Beautiful. So they have this nice kind of brownish color on them. That is, again, from the paprika. It's going to give it a savory flavor, but it gives that more kind of golden brown color to it. Here is our gorgeous sourdough loaf. This is our traditional loaf. Again, I like to do a golden brown kind of bake on it. Look, we have a nice kind of blonder crust on the bottom so it doesn't get too hard and crunchy. And then, of course, our beautiful little design here. And we've got a nice little piece on it. Slide this over here. We'll get our next batch of our fish out. And then we should be able to kind of serve up in just a second once we get our tartar sauce made. When you're taking your fried fish out, now you could put it on a drying rack. I like to do it on paper towels. Always put the greasy side down because that greasy side will then soak up into the paper towel, which will leave it nice and crispy versus soggy. You don't want to just put it on a flat surface or it won't like crisp up. It will get soggy because it will sit in the grease. So a cookie drying rack also, or not a drying rack, but a cookie like cooling rack works well as well. But the nice thing I find with the paper towels is then when we're done eating and clean up, I can use that paper towel to soak up my extra grease to throw it away because you don't ever want to put your grease down the drain. Okay.
Question, where do you get your fish, and is it frozen or fresh?
So a couple places that I get my fish from. So Costco, I'll get my tilapia from. And then this is going to be kind of crazy, but where we live, we have Amazon Fresh, which is like I order it like I order anything off of Amazon, but they'll deliver groceries to me. And so it is a delicious, they both have really good tilapia. Aldi's also has really good tilapia. Those are kind of my 3 favorite places for it because their fresh is just really nice for it. And I find that fresh for frying works a little bit better because when they freeze fish, it gets a little waterlogged. Okay, so we've got our tartar sauce here. I'm just going to add in a little bit of garlic salt. So just about, again, a half a teaspoon because the mayo is already going to be salty and you won't need to add any more. A little pinch of pepper right here. And then we will be ready to kind of serve up our dinner here. So, but again, look at this beautiful homemade tartar sauce, and it's going to taste better than anything you could buy at the store. Okay, let me bring all this stuff over here so we can get ready to serve up. Now, I'm not going to cut into my loaf yet because if you've ever made your sourdough loaf, it needs to sit for about 10 minutes before you cut into it, or it's going to be gummy because it needs to release its steam naturally. Let's grab my thing here. Beautiful. We've got our sweet potatoes ready. So let's grab our plate and we'll serve up dinner. Okay. Let me make a little room. I got to clear some room. So in the fall, I told you I'm crazy about Halloween, but we have our little candy dish over here, and it is, got to move it to the side.
Hey, a question real quick. Can you go over the tartar sauce?
Yes. So the tartar sauce, you're going to mince up about a 4th cup of pickles. You want like a kosher, like dill pickle, a 4th cup of red onions minced up nicely. Then you're going to add in a teaspoon of minced up fresh dill, or you could do a half a teaspoon of dry dill, about a teaspoon of chopped up green onions, about 2/3 a cup of mayo, about 2 teaspoons of fresh lemon juice. Mix it all together, add in about a half teaspoon of salt and garlic salt and pepper.
And then a quick request to go over the dressing.
The dressing, okay. So for our dressing, we had about a cup of mayo. We added in about 2 teaspoons of vinegar. Apple cider vinegar is the preferred one. Then I added in about a squeeze of lemon, so about a teaspoon of lemon juice, about 2 tablespoons of sugar, a half a teaspoon of black pepper, half a teaspoon of garlic salt, and that's it. Oh, and there's carrots and coleslaw and all that jazz. Okay, let's serve up dinner now. So for dinner tonight, we have our Cajun fried tilapia, where we use Tony Chachere's Creole seasoning in here, paprika, Lowry seasoning salt. And those are going to play perfectly with our Cajun sweet potato fries, where we actually battered them up with a flour, paprika, onion powder, Tony Chachere's mixture, so they'll have a little bit of heat. And of course, a really happy dollop of tartar sauce on here because every bite of fish needs tartar sauce, in my opinion. And then our homemade coleslaw made with cabbage. We've got our carrot ribbons and then our creamy dressing and a little bit of red onion and green onions in there. And then we will, of course, have a slice of our sourdough bread as our grain. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of these recipes at home, you can just go to that link, search for what we made. So we've got our Cajun fried tilapia and our sweet potato fries and coleslaw, and you can always watch and cook along with us again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gear and gadgets in it. I've got my cutting boards, my knives, I've got my hex-clad pans in there, even my big baking sheets in there. So all the different gadgets we use in the kitchen, we have in there in case you're interested in what we use. But again, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe.